Back in time for Sesame Street, episode number 16, Thursday, September the 8th, 2022. A farewell to the Queen, Queen Elizabeth II, who passed away peacefully at her castle in Scotland at the age of 96, 1926 to 2022. Good evening. This is Derek McIntyre, once again with another episode of Back in Time for Sesame Street. Tonight we do a special episode from February 22nd, 1994. For you 90s kids watching tonight who grew up in the 90s. And today also marks a very sad day in the royal family. Also, we lost our Queen Elizabeth II, at the ripe old age of 96 years old. May the Lord rest her soul. So tonight's episode aired in the days of VHS and satellite TV and the early days of the internet. Tonight's episode, as we look back at those times, and also back when I was in grade 9 and in high school too. So you ready to get started, kids? Tonight's episode is titled Old King Cole. A Mean Old Soul is the title of tonight's episode. Sesame Street, episode 3202. As you notice, the series had a new theme, which has been in use since episode 3000, as you'll notice tonight on tonight's episode. Sunny day sweeping up, clouds away to where the air is clean. Can you tell me how to get to Sesame Street? How to get to Sesame Street? Next, we come to scene 1. At Finders Keepers. That was a store that appeared on the 90s episodes. Ruthie goes through some of her memorabilia and sings about how the items make her feel, like laughing. Ruthie was a fairly new addition to Sesame Street at this point in time. In the 90s. Now, this next segment is a cartoon I remember really well. It did air in the 80s. And I remember it in the 80s. It's a cartoon. A man assembles the word love, and a bird pecks the O into the shape of a heart. Yes, I remember this really well. Back in the 1980s, in 83, 84. In the 80s anyway. And when me and my younger bro were watching Sesame Street in 94. Yes, on occasion too. So probably saw this then too. When my younger bro was only 7. Monster Piece Theater. Good evening. I am your host, Alistair Cookie. It's Alistair Cookie. And tonight, the postman always rings twice. So the plot of this Monster Piece Theater segment is Grover answers the door to many different people, including movers, a baker, and so much more, until Grover, irritated enough, finally hears the doorbell ring twice. Then a postwoman shows up at the door with an important letter. And all the other people that go over let in say, I have an important letter waiting. I have an important letter waiting. Then Cookie Monster comes in. Cookie Monster then closes the segment. Next is a cartoon, but this is from episode number 3006. It's from 92. So I might have seen this with my younger brother, but I'm not sure if I did, because we didn't watch Sesame Street every day at this point in time. Just sometimes when over like Christmas holidays or March break, for example, would have seen Sesame Street with my younger brother at this time. Yes, I still had the old Zenith Chroma Color 2-floor model TV. My parents didn't upgrade their TV until 96 with a 35-inch Mitsubishi. But yes, it was still the old brown carpeting with the wood paneling. And oh yeah, the basement was still pretty much the same in 94. Next is a film I really adore. It's called Wegman's Dogs. They get next to each other in pictures. Various pictures are shown of the dogs. 3 dogs, the 3 Weimawanners. If you really want to know what type of dog is in the pictures. And I got to mention one thing, the color in this episode really stands out really well too for a 90s episode. A lot of bright colors in the segments. The colors really stand out compared to some of the older episodes. The next is the Muppets. It's the Oinker sisters sing about what's important to them. What's important to me? What's important to me? Oink, oink, oink. What's important to me? Now, this next cartoon I remember really well. 3 Owls Blink. The artist is an O. Gustafson. This little cartoon with the 3 owls I remember really well in the 80s. Growing up in the 1980s. Yep. I could have seen this in the 90s as well, too, in the early 90s as well with my younger brother, but they weren't playing a lot of these old, as many of these old segments in the 90s as they were in the 80s. Next is another cartoon, some early computer animation from the late 1980s. 3 computer animated fish. And 3 happens to be our number for tonight. The number 3. That's our number for this evening. It's 3. Next, sticking with the number 3 is the cartoon. It is the Donny Bud series. The Donny Bud number series. Donny Bud sings about 3 trios of animals who live on a fat lady's lap. The artist is a Bud Lucky. We first saw this back in the 70s, so this was a rare occasion of a 1970s segment still in use in the 90s and 94. These next 2 segments deal with triangles. It has 3 sides and 3 points, a triangle, and there's 180 degrees in the triangle, kids. You'll learn that later on in geometry in school, of course. So in the first segment, it's a Muppet celebrity. All the kids are too busy to enjoy looking at Telly's triangle with them. He runs into John Goodman, who happens to be a hardcore triangle lover himself, much to Telly's surprise. And even pulls out a triangle lover's card. And Telly pulls his out too. His triangle lover's card out too. The next is a short film. Maria does the voiceover. We are in the city. We're looking for triangles in the city until we come to a railway trestle, which we find 4 triangles. And then the 2 triangles make 6. Of course, this is from the late 80s, so I might have seen this. It's just I was aging out of Sesame Street at the time, but oh, next is the Muppets. This segment, the next three songs, the next three segments, I should say. Sorry about that. It's three segments. Deal with the importance of brushing your teeth. That's right, kids. You got to brush your teeth after every meal and before you go to bed, so you don't get cavities and have to get fillings at the dentist. So in the first segment with the Muppets, Forgetful Jones forgets what he has to do at night. Clementine tells him it involves using a toothbrush. And he remembers that he and Buster the horse have to brush each other's teeth. This first appeared in the 80s. The next is a song. It's called Take Care of That Smile. Yes, because you only get two sets of teeth, your baby teeth and your adult teeth, which you really got to take care of, because that's the only set of teeth you get after that, and they don't grow back. So kids, you got to brush your teeth after every meal and before you go to bed. Next is an animation, Toothpaste, coming soon to a mouth near you. This has late 1980s computer animation too. The next is a cartoon. A man tries to get directions to a parking space and eventually uses a map to get there. The artist is a Paul Feierlinger. And this first aired in the late 1980s. So I may or may do remember this. I don't remember. But don't forget, the last time me and my younger brother were watching Sesame Street was almost 30 years ago. So it's still a long time ago. Oh, next is Mysterious Theater with Vincent Twice. Vincent Twice. Dial M for Mother. Sherlock Hemlock tries to figure out what he needs to call his mother before Big Ben strikes midnight. Yes, Big Ben is the famous clock tower, and actually is known as the bell. Actually, is the bell inside the clock tower in London, England, at Westminster Palace. So, before Big Ben strikes midnight, as he stands next to a London telephone booth, the message so the first Sherlock Hemlock has to send the message by mail, but then the clock shows 2 minutes to midnight on Big Ben. And Sherlock Hemlock says, no, that's not going to work because the mail won't get there in 2 minutes. The next is a jogger. Yeah, next is a jogger. Sherlock Hemlock thinks he can bring the message to his mother, but no, that won't work neither. It's only 1 minute to midnight. And to get that to Edinburgh, Scotland as well, too, from London, England, is quite a ways. The next, Sherlock Hemlock comes to a telephone booth. It's red. You have red phone booths in England. Then Sherlock Hemlock uses the phone to call his mother to wish his mother a happy birthday. And Sherlock Hemlock's dog Watson barks happy birthday to his mother over the phone as well, too. This is Vincent Twice. Vincent Twice for Mysterious Theater. The next is a song. It's called Mom and Me. It sings about different families. Kids living with their aunt and uncle, their grandparents, it's just their mother, it's just their dad, and so on. Next we come to scene 2. Prairie Dawn Louis. Yes, Louis was still with the show in '94. Although I forgot to mention earlier that tonight's episode was videotape recorded on December 29th, 1993. Yes, they had the Sesame Street cast work over the Christmas holidays, between Christmas and New Year's, doing episodes. Yes, they did. So in scene 2, Prairie Dawn and Louis enjoy a nice quiet day in the park, reading. However, the sounds is broken with various loud city sounds, which includes traffic honking, a jackhammer, and various other loud city sounds. Eventually, Prairie Dawn has had enough and loudly yells for some peace and quiet. The noises stop, and Prairie remarks, "Sometimes have to be loud in order for it to be quiet." Yeah, this next cartoon I remember really well. With the mysterious little box. We'll call it the mysterious little box, this cartoon. A mysterious little box on a tightrope entraps a bird, a train, and a cat, which can still be heard. A large frog eats the box and makes all of the sounds inside. I remember this in like 1983, 84. Yeah, and I remember that music too, being a little intense for me at that age. The next is a really cool film. It's a song called Body Dance, Body Dance. And in this film, if you really look carefully, you'll see a early 1990s, late 1980s ghetto blaster or cassette player in this film. And it's by an MC Light. This is actually from the late 1980s, early 90s. Next is a Muppet and Kid moment, which I remember really well from 1983, 84. It's Grover. Yes, I remember Eric, the African American kid. Then Grover and Eric observed the differences between the fur and skin. Observed. Next is another important animation. It's T is one of her letters. Tonight is T. That's one of her letters. Tonight is T. So the animation is T for toothbrush and toothpaste. First, the toothbrush appears under the T. Then the T dispenses toothpaste on the toothbrush. Then the toothbrush brushes the T from yellow to white. In this animation, the next is a film. The floating kids form a capital letter T. Sticking with the letter T. T as in television or telephone, too. Some other big T words you'll learn, kids, in school. Or here's a big T word for you that you'll learn later on. Telecommunications. Now that's a big word, and you'll learn about that later on in school. The next is a cartoon. It's Gordon does the voiceover. Capital T, small t. Two caterpillars form a capital T and a lowercase t. First seen in the 86. Next is scene 3. Louis heads back to work when Monty shows up to do something silly with Prairie by jumping, waving, and shouting, "Arugula!" Prairie wants no part in this, and Monty believes she doesn't even know how to be silly. Prairie gets so fed up with Monty's pestering that she demonstrates how silly she can be. And only he doesn't pay attention. Now this next cartoon with the plant I remember really well. Two hippie kids wonder how to make their droopy plant grow. First you try a trombone, an alarm clock, a dog, and finally they give the plant water and the plant perks up. Sea plants need water, or else they'll be droopy and wilt. The next is a short film. 5 girls play a clapping game. In this short film. Oh, next is the Muppet segment I remember really well. It's Bert and Ernie. That's what friends are for. Ernie sings to Bert about about friends being tolerant of each other's differences. Well, Bert just wants to sleep. And Bert, finally exasperated, that means fed up or really not happy. So I'm going to sleep in the kitchen. Yes, I know it's been been probably 30 years since I've seen this last, or it's been a very long time anyway since I last seen this. But it brings back a lot of memories. And next we come to a cartoon. A horse falls apart into a jigsaw puzzle. Oh, this is another example of a mid 1970s segment and still in use in the 90s. In 94. So a horse falls apart into a jigsaw puzzle and the cowboy has to put the horse back together. Then they gallop off into the sunset. Oh, next is scene 4. Scene we all been waiting for, kids. Scene 4. Back at Finders Keepers, Big Bird comes across a bowl that previously belonged to Old King Cole. What a merry old soul. Ruthie recalls the time when he wasn't a merry old soul, but in fact a mean one. Ruthie tells the story of Old King Cole by Martin P. Robertson, who plays him, who would mock his staff, played by Kevin Clash, Jennifer Bashir, and David Rudman, and Joey Mazzariano, and then Alice Deneen play all the other merry old King Cole staff. And old King Cole mock his staff for being different, for being so different. Their feelings hurt. They all quit. Suddenly gets a visit from his fairy godmother. Ruthie plays his fairy godmother, who explains what he did was wrong. He doesn't seem to care and makes fun of her too, causing her to abandon him too. Soon enough, King Cole becomes sad because there's no one around to bring him his pipe, his bowl, and his fiddle for him. His fairy godmother returns and summons his friends so that he can apologize. So the moral of the story is, kids, don't call people names or mock people because they're different. It's not right. It doesn't matter who you are. And if you're different from the others, you don't mock somebody because they're different and make fun of them. That's the moral of the story. Now we continue with scene 4. After the story, King Cole appears having a lunch date with Ruthie. He compliments everyone in the store and invites them to join him for lunch. So next we have a cartoon. 2 white squares or cubes try to push a great big object, which is a great big blue cube, and are reluctant to let a black cube join them at first. But then it turns out the black cube, after you join the 2 white cubes, they all push together and you finally move the big blue cube. And then one of the white cubes, their hat appears. A little green hat. So the moral of this story is because someone's different than you doesn't mean they can't do it. Look at a lot of people who are different who've done wonderful things in this world, including Albert Einstein. He said he had autism, but he was very smart and came up with EMC squared. So there you go. We're all the same, no matter how we look on the outside. It's what's inside that counts. Everyone's the same. It doesn't matter what you look like. And next we come to a little film I remember really well from the early to mid 80s. It's blocks being built in the shape of a cat. Also known as cat block structure is the name of this film. Then a gray tabby or a cat appears and knocks the blocks all over. Now this next cartoon I remember very well. Is sticking with cats. The first, we show a black cat, a white cat, orange cat, marmalade cat, mouse cat, bird cat, chasing balls of strings cat. And the artist is none other than Jeff Hale. He was with Sesame Street during its golden years. Jeff Hale. Now we come to it. Here is Kermit the Frog with another fast-breaking news story. It's a Sesame Street news flash, which is supposed to be about the princess and the pea, but instead of a pea, the princess sleeps on things beginning with a C. It's actually known as the Princess and the Sea. And sea things found on the princess's bed include a cactus, a crocodile, a coconut, and a clarinet are found on the princess's bed. And at the end, Kermit has to sleep on this bed full of sea objects, much to Kermit's reluctance. Yes, I do remember this in the late 80s. Or in the 80s, I should say, late 80s. Oh, next is the sand animations. Yes, I remember those sand animations very, very well. And this time it's the letter C. Our other letter tonight is C. First seen in episode 625, so it's another instance of a 1970 segment in use in the 90s. Then we come to scene 5, the closing scene. Everyone assembles in the arbor for lunch, where King Cole's staff prepares various international dishes. King Cole and Big Bird announce the sponsors. Sesame Street is brought to you today by the letters C. And don't forget the letter T. And by the number 3. Sesame Street is a production of the Children's Television Workshop. Sesame Street, copyright 1994, all rights reserved. This is PBS. Woohoo! Woof woof! Yes, those famous PBS pea heads, which scared some kids, come at the end. And I've read stories of kids hiding behind the pillow so they don't have to see it at the end. But I find that the pea heads fascinating, to tell you the truth. And so comes to the close another classic episode of Sesame Street from 1994 for you 90s kids. It was time to turn off the old Zenith, soon to be replaced with the Mitsubishi, and play some board games indoors and sip and listen to a few compact discs of your favorite kids songs, and maybe go on the computer for a bit too. So tune in tomorrow night as we review episode number 333 from very early 1972. So tomorrow, you 1970s fans are going to have your turn. And Saturday, it's for 80s fans, with episode where Louis breaks his arm on Saturday. So be sure to tune in tomorrow, kids. Tomorrow night at 8 for another episode of Back in Time for Sesame Street. And until then, this is Derek McIntyre signing off, wishing you a very good night.